call this meeting to order. We're a little early, about a minute early. However, this is Tuesday, June 9th, and I'd like to call to order the June 9th meeting of the County Commissioners. Our invocation today is by Commissioner Terpstra, and the Pledge of Allegiance is led by Justin Roebuck. Please rise and face the flag. Thanks. After the prayer.
Dear Lord in heaven, thank you for all the things that you provided us for us today. Please provide us with wisdom during this meeting. May you also be with the farmers and crops and bless them with a bountiful year. Lord, I pray for our servicemen and women, home and abroad, that they will be safe protecting us. I also want to lift up our nation during this difficult time. May your spirit strike out all evil and hatred and division that we see in this country. For all things are possible in your name. Amen. To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Justin, would you call the roll, please?
Yes, sir. Mr. Garcia.
Here.
Mr. Baumann. Here. Mr. Zylstra.
Here.
Mr. Dannenberg.
Here.
Mr. Meppelink.
Here.
Mr. Terpstra. Here. Mr. Holtvluer.
Present.
Mr. DeYoung.
Here.
Mr. Kyers.
Here.
Mr. Bergman.
Here.
And Mr. Fensky.
Here.
Mr. Chair, we have a quorum.
Thank you. Presentation and petitions and communications.
None from us.
Okay, thank you. The next thing on the agenda is public comment. This is an opportunity for someone to speak either online or in person. I would ask you to limit your comments to 3 minutes and give us your name and address.
I'm Lucy Rios. My address is 604 Appletree Court, Holland, Michigan 494. As you can see, I'm a person with a disability and use a wheelchair. I live, work, and participate in our community. And I'm here because I want you as commissioners.
Hold on just a moment. Can we stop it just a minute? Those of us on Zoom cannot hear her at all. We have to find a better way.
Why don't we have Bert?
Look here.
All right, Mr. Chair, we're going to try this mic.
Okay, thank you.
Let's start reading.
Let's start over, okay?
I am Lucia Rios. My address is 604 Appletree Court, Holland, Michigan 49423. As you can see, I'm a person with a disability and use a wheelchair. I live, work, and participate in our community. I'm here because I want you as commissioners to consider leading the way in which we think about access and inclusion in our county for people with disabilities. I'm a firm believer that accessibility in various forms are great for everyone. Today, it wasn't difficult for me to get here. I have a car that is modified so I can drive. There are accessible parking spots and access into the door. However, not every disability is like mine, and everyone's situation is not the same. Since COVID-19, our world has shifted to provide inclusion in many forms. Those who are working remotely are attending meetings, such as this one, which is hosted virtually through Zoom. All these accommodations, there's been very many, keep people engaged and have given people with disabilities an opportunity to participate equally. I want our Ottawa County Commissioners to help lead this effort in keeping our access and inclusion alive. Keep providing the option to participate remotely through Zoom. Include people with disabilities in conversation about what inclusion long-term can mean. COVID-19 has in fact provided the ability for accessibility through technology, and I don't want this to stop. I hope we don't stop making access and inclusion an important topic. I, along with others, will still be disabled. I want our Lakeshore community to continue to be mindful of those with disabilities and how adaptable we were during a crisis to include everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, we have Dr. Vicki Lynn Holmes ready to provide a comment.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead.
My name is Dr. Vicki Lynn Holmes, 68 West 17th Street, Holland, Michigan, 49423. I wanted to congratulate Ottawa County for its wise decision to create the Department of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, even while it saddens me that we need such an office. And I'm here today just to briefly underscore its need. Picture this. There's a big tree eclipsing a little tree, and the big tree is receiving an abundance of sunshine, and the little tree is receiving very little, if any. The big tree says, we have enough sunshine, there's plenty, we're fine. But what's the little tree saying? It's a perspective thing. The little tree is the one that should make the call. It's the minorities, the people of color who determine the need and the effectiveness. Concrete action such as the DEI department is a start. Creating and enforcing laws that overturn the erosion of our political and economic power will do even more. Part of the DEI department's role, as said on the website, is to identify implicit bias in internal policies, procedures, practices, and in external services delivery. And kudos, it's needed. So I live in Holland. I'm a math professor at Hope College, an elder at my church, and we want to attract other people, other talent of all types. And we will attract, but we will lose us just as fast if attitudes and actions don't change. We'll have an ever revolving door until the door stops. So we need this department. So again, I say thank you for this. It's a much needed acknowledgement of the respect and validation that people of color in America and Ottawa County in particular have long been denied. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, we have Chandra Smith wanting to speak at public comment.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Shonda. Here you go. Unmute yourself.
Chandra, go ahead. Okay. Margot Walters, you can speak now during public comment.
Unmute. I believe now I'm unmuted. Yes?
Yes.
Hello. My name is Margot Walters. I am at 14174 Fox Trail Drive, Holland, Michigan. And I want to
She just got,
hello again.
Yep, go ahead. I'm sorry.
That's no problem. I just wanted to say that I'm really happy to be living in the town of Holland, the city of Holland, Holland Township, especially during a time of crisis where we already have a diversity, equity, and inclusion office in Ottawa County who can be able to help answer some of the questions that we've seen that are coming out of the peaceful unity marches that are happening throughout our communities. And I want to encourage us to continue to use the office that we've created to help keep the conversations going. These are really important conversations to have at this time, and I'm very happy that this office is already in place.
thank you, Margot.
Thank you.
What happened to Shonda?
Chandra, are you out there?
Here she is.
Are you there?
Yeah.
Yes, we can hear you now.
Can you hear me?
Yep, go ahead.
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry. Yes, my name is Chandra Stewart. I live at 9438 South Wind Drive in Zeeland, Michigan. And I just want to say again, thank you, kind of ditto on what everyone said so far. I was a former employee at Ottawa County Health Department for about 2 years. And I am now working as a social worker with Allegan County Community Mental Health. And those strides and that occurring in this county has been a great eye opener for me and my community. I am Black and I've been living in Holland for 25 years. And the event that occurred on Sunday and the previous days has been just refreshing. being Black in a community and knowing that sense of having that sense of belonging, and fighting for that and standing for that and protesting for that is something that we all, don't want to see in 2020, but it is happening. And so the fact that we were able to have a peaceful unity protest and the turnout was just something we could have never imagined. So I just want to thank you guys for continuing to do the work, but I just also want to encourage you that the work needs to be done. We want to have a place in the community. Me being a longstanding resident, it's still hurtful that I'm not able to go to be in places and spaces where I can see a lot of people that look like me. I'm raising my children here. And so I just want to just kind of put that on the horizon, that I want to continue to see things like that happen and have the doors open for that.
Thanks, Chandra.
CFHZ, you may speak now.
This is Mike Gorehouse, sorry. It says that CFHE because I'm with the Community Foundation of the Holland-Zeeland area. So I also live in Ottawa County. I live at 14259 Spruce Hollow Drive in Holland, Michigan. My name is Mike Gorehouse. I'm president of the Community Foundation, and I just wanted to call in today and with three things. One, really appreciate the county having taken steps forward in recent years in a long journey in elevating the importance of diversity, equity, inclusion into all of our work. Second, I just want to encourage each of us to continue to think about how we can live into this moment to elevate voices, centering voices of color in our conversations, and really ensuring that those of us with significant amounts of privilege acknowledge that. So encourage the county and commissioners to acknowledge that reality for us all and live into this ourselves personally. And then lastly, just a challenge to myself, other listeners, and to each of us that while this issue is by no means a new issue in recent weeks, I do think that what we are seeing is an opportunity to make progress, progress on racism that's been here for a long time. And it's only going to happen if leaders take an extra step or two beyond what we thought we would take this year. And I say that for myself, I say that for the Community Foundation, and I would just challenge the county and everyone listening to take up this moment and take a step or two further than we thought was possible so that all members of our community can thrive and feel welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Viola, you may speak now.
Hello, I'm Viola Jackson Cleveland. I am a resident here in Holland. I live at 79 West 19th Street. I am employed at Evergreen Commons, and I also sit on the Neighborhood Improvement Committee as well too. Like many of the others that have chimed in, I have been excited to see just how many people have stepped out to say that they recognize that a change is needed and are willing to ask the hard questions and do the hard work that's necessary to be able to make our community a better community. I think that we have an opportunity here to really evaluate the processes that our current police officers take, as well as other organizations in our community, as far as building trust and transparency about our actions, and to be leaders in some aspects into setting a tone of what we will and what we will not tolerate as a community. I have lived here in Holland for 22 years, coming from Chicago, Illinois, and I can see how rough it can be and coming from a larger metropolitan area, but to know that it's not always just over there that things happen. I want to let you know that it is here too, that things do happen. It might not be on the front page news, but there are a lot of members within our community that can share stories and let you know that there is room for growth.
Thanks, Viola.
George, you're welcome to speak now. George, you're muted.
Am I here?
Yep, there you go.
Yes.
Okay, good afternoon. Thank you for hearing me this afternoon. I'm George Barfield. I live in Spring Lake at 606 Ellie Court. I'm a person of color in our community, one of the few, but I'm happy to be here. I would like to see our commission take some formal position on the Black Lives Matter movement. Something as simple as a declaration that Black lives do matter. And I think that helps us to embrace the idea that all of us are important. And many of us who have not been seen as important by some people might be encouraged to do so if our leaders could have some sort of declaration that Black lives do matter. Thank you.
Thanks, George.
Raina Masco, you may speak now.
Can you hear me now?
Yep, we can hear you.
Thank you, commissioners. My name is Raina Masco and I live at 513 Woodlawn Avenue in Grand Haven. I'm here today because I'm concerned about the current state of our country due to the killing of George Floyd and because I'm overwhelmed by the positive response to this tragedy that has been expressed by our community. I want to confess that although I consider myself an ally to the Black community, I did not fully understand the statement Black Lives Matter because I only saw it as a support for a movement that I was not educated on. I was afraid that by me saying Black Lives Matter, I was endorsing a movement that the media has portrayed as being political and promoting violence. However, after witnessing the killing of George Floyd, I quickly came to understand that me stating that Black Lives Matter has nothing to do with endorsing a movement, but simply stating that my Black brothers and sisters have been screaming for decades that Black lives do matter, that we cannot continue to dismiss their cries for acknowledgement, help, and for all of us to wake up and see the injustices, racism, and police brutality that many innocent victims have fallen to. I want to ask all of you, if this was happening to you in your community, what would you want and ask from the leaders of your community? You have already taken a big step by establishing our DEI department, and I commend you for that. You have also set up implicit bias trainings. We all have biases and are blinded by our own perceptions and our own experiences that prevent us from seeing how the world works for others. I also want to say that I support good law enforcement officers who risk their lives every day to make sure that we have safe communities, and that I won't let what happened to George Floyd change my support for them. I'm asking you today to take a stance and acknowledge that our Black brothers and sisters need you to stand united with them, and that their lives are valued, that Black lives matter, and that Ottawa County is a place where everyone belongs. Thank you.
Thanks, Raina.
Mr. Chair, that's it for public comment. We did receive a chat to all of the commissioners from a Sally Palmer of 11538 South Lake Drive in Holland. And she writes, I'm asking the commissioners to stand with the Black community and recognize that Black Lives Matter. The commissioners need to voice it to the community and to work with the DEI office to dismantle racist systems. Oh, and we have another public comment identified as Green. Green, you may speak now.
Thank you. I apologize for clicking in late. Had another meeting and joined in a little late, but just want to also echo my voice.
Ma'am, can we get you to state your name and address for the record, please?
I'm sorry. My name is Vanessa Green, and I work at Hope College, and I've worked in the Hope College community for over 16 years as the director of the Center for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. And my address is, what is my address? 5939 Barcroft Drive. And I wanted to just be able to chime in to basically congratulate Ottawa County on making such a big move in opening up the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion in Ottawa County. Is extremely important, particularly as we look at the climate in our society, not only from the police, but just in general, in terms of the racial climate of the limited amount of diversity. Ottawa County is, one of the, has the lowest diversity rate probably in the state of Michigan. And so to have this office is extremely important. And so I commend you on that vision and commend you on the work that you are doing in the community. And as I think about what is going on with George Floyd, I just wanted to make sure that we don't look at it as an isolated incident. Often when we have these conversations, they are looked at as an isolated incident. And there's a documentary called 13, and that documentary really deals with historical context. And before the war on drugs and the war on crime began, and it was really kind of a political move to promote like election outcomes. But before the war on drugs and the war on crime started, there were 350,000 people incarcerated in the United States. Today, there's more than 2.5 million people incarcerated. We have the highest in the world. And that in and of itself really indicates that we do need criminal justice reform. We need reform in the way that we conduct our engagement and interaction within our communities, and certainly implicit bias really has a lot of impact on that. But a lot of it is so rooted in the foundation of our country and the way that that we continue to view Black and brown people and people of color. And so I just basically want to commend you and to support the Office of Diversity and Inclusion within Ottawa County, and also to challenge you to review and examine your policies and your practices, and to just advance the kind of work that you're already doing in order to have a greater impact and different outcomes when it comes to Black and brown bodies in our community. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, we have Lindsay Cherry wanting to provide public comment. Go ahead.
All right.
Hi, thanks for hearing from me today. I am Lindsay Cherry. I live on 424 Pine Avenue, Holland, Michigan, 49423. I am a teacher at West Ottawa. I work as a 7th grade teacher at Harbor Lights Middle School. And I have been doing work around diversity, equity, inclusion for the last 4 years, research, all types of stuff. A few nights ago, my son had asked me, Mom, now if I run, they're going to shoot me, but if I stay down, they're going to kill me. What am I supposed to do? And he is 8 years old, processing this horrific event that he has seen in the media and that we've been discussing at home. We've been a part of the protests and so on and so forth. I love the steps that I'm seeing within our county and our state and around the country. And I thank you for having this diversity, equity, inclusion sector along in Ottawa County. I just want to encourage you to continue that work so that I can confidently tell my students and my son that there's work being done, that the leaders in our community are being intentional, just like your mom and dad and teacher are, to make sure that you feel safe, that you feel welcome, that you are just as much a part of the community as everyone else, that we're not going to withhold opportunities or keep opportunities from you, but the sky is the limit. You can do and be anything that you want. That is what I tell my students, all of my students, no matter what race, ethnicity, whoever they are, that they can be anything that they want. But am I truly confident that that is true? And so I just hope that this work continues. And I just want to encourage you in that work. Thank you.
Thank you, Lindsay.
Mr. Chair, we have another public comment from Bree Austin Roberts. Go ahead, please.
Hi, good afternoon. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
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 Hi,
Hi,
okay.
Bree.
Hi, thank you for allowing me to speak. I am a Holland resident of the past 9 years, originally from Chicago, Illinois. I live currently at 963 Sagewood Court, where I raise my two children in this community, where they attend Vanderbilt Charter Academy. I just wanted to, well, first of all, to kind of echo everyone else with the diversity and inclusion that we have going on in Ottawa County was very much needed and is very much appreciated. And I'm always open to implement change and volunteer my time whenever and wherever, however I can help. So just always keep that in mind. I wanted to address not only, the lives that were taken, which kind of really put this Black Lives Matter into full force over the past few weeks, but I just want to encourage and maybe challenge people to think about people who have the power that are in these kinds of positions to implement change within our systems. The protests and the rallies and things of that nature, those are also, vehicles for change as well. But quite honestly, I'm exhausted with the rallies, I'm exhausted with the protests, and I would like to see change happen from the inside out. And I can speak to my experience as a Black woman in Holland. When I moved here, I had a 4-year degree, and since being here, I attained a master's degree in social work, and I also work for Allegheny County Community Mental Health, and I was in the past a part of the neighborhood improvement committee, as well as I served on a 3-year term as a city commissioner. So I'm very familiar and engaged with my community. I feel very blessed to be a part of the Holland community, but there has been times where I've been the only Black person in spaces where I feel like there needs to be people who look like me, and where, our voices also need to be heard. So seeing people in positions of power, seeing people in, people of color in management positions, those are the spaces where we don't have a huge presence. Okay, and I think that is a huge part of the problem. And with so many deaths, it's like we just keep continuing to wait for these things to happen. And now we're at a point where we are completely overwhelmed, hurt, traumatized, frustrated, and want to really see some kind of positive change. In the school systems, I want to address that as well. Wherever we can step in and speak up, I have had to, march into board meetings and speak on behalf of my children where they have been called racist names, and it was treated just the same as being called stupid or somebody stepped on somebody's foot in line. And I had to explain to a dean that this is unacceptable. And it's just like bullying is a zero tolerance policy, racism should be a zero tolerance policy. And so I feel so overwhelmed, and sometimes it feels like you're fighting alone. And so to have our allies, side by side, rallying with us, speaking up for us and on our behalf alongside of us, that's much appreciated. And I just want to continue to encourage those, in those positions to use your voices to help to create some change. So yeah, just these school systems, the employment system.
Ms. Roberts, your 3 minutes is up.
I'm sorry.
Thanks, Bree.
Mr. Chair, right now I don't see any other public comment. We do have some written comments. The next one's from Kim Nagy from 2407 Basswood in Jennison, identifies herself as chair of the Ottawa County Democratic Party. Thanks, commissioners, for providing the Zoom link. I echo the statements of several participants. The DEI department has been a great addition to our civic life. A statement from the commission supporting diversity and inclusion in the county would be very meaningful to our brothers and sisters. The next chat is from, my name is Sherry Casey, and I live at 305 Valley Court in Grand Haven. I also am asking you to stand with the Black community by declaring Black Lives Matter here in Ottawa County. Our community needs to stand up and clearly communicate that everyone is welcome here, not just tolerated. The next chat is from Rebecca Baker from 14197 Deer Cove Drive in Holland. As a taxpayer, I believe the importance of the Ottawa County DE&I office cannot be stressed enough, and a public statement in support of Black Lives Matter and a detailed action plan from Ottawa County is needed. The next chat is from Valerie Petrie, 14012 Fox Trail Drive in Holland. I would like to echo Raina's and Vanessa's comments. I also concur with Vanessa's recommendation for viewing the film. Kudos on the Diversity and Inclusion Division. I ask you to place racial equality as a priority in Ottawa County. Maybe even a public statement to our community about where your priorities are regarding equality. And we have another public comment from Amy Masco. Amy, go ahead. You have 3 minutes.
So can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. I just want to encourage the commission to also put forth a statement about Black Lives Matter. I want to echo what's been said. I have 4 African-American children. I live in Grand Haven Township, and my kids have been called the N-word when they're downtown. My daughter was told to go back to Africa by somebody at when she worked at Tim Hortons. So my daughter said the other day she went for a walk in our neighborhood. She was 4 houses down, and a minivan pulled up next to her and asked if she was lost. So it isn't she doesn't feel safe in our town. So I think that it's something that's important to put out to, I think somebody used the word, show that we do more than tolerate. I don't even know that we do a very good job of tolerating people of color in this community, and particularly in Grand Haven. But I hope that the commission does something, because I was at a Grand Haven board meeting, city board meeting about a year and a half ago. And that meeting particularly was asking for people of color to speak up about their experiences. And one woman said, "I'm worried my grandkids won't, my kids won't bring their kids back to see me if I stay living here." And I feel that same way. So I just think we have to do something to make our community more welcoming for people of color. Thanks.
I don't see any more public comment or chats at this time. Maybe there may be more for the second public comment, but as of right now, that is it.
I see one coming in from Barbara Lee and Horson, but I don't see any comment.
That's correct, Mr. Chair, and if it does come through, that could be read during the second public comment period.
Okay, good, thanks. All right, moving on. The next thing is communications from county staff. And Mr. Bauman, would you make those motions, please?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Make a motion to open the public hearing on the proposed 2020 millage rates for county operations of 3.9 mils, emergency 911 of 0.4288 mils, parks of 0.3233 mils, community mental health of 0.2923, and the road commission of 0.4873 mils.
Is there a second for that?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there anyone from the public that wishes to speak?
I think we need to have a roll call vote, Mr. Chair, to open the hearing.
Okay. All right, go ahead.
Mr. Kyers.
Yes.
Mr. Holtvluwer.
Yes.
Mr. Meppelink.
Yes.
Mr. Terpstra.
Yes.
Mr. Garcia.
Yes.
Mr. Zylstra.
Yes.
Mr. Fensky.
Yes.
Mr. Danenberg. Mr. DeYoung.
Yes.
Mr. Bauman.
Yes.
And Mr. Bergman.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, now, is there anyone from the public who wishes to comment?
Mr. Chair, we're not seeing anyone raising their hands for public comment, nor any chats regarding this public hearing on the millage rates.
Okay, all right. Then, Mr. Bauman, would you read the next motion, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move to close the public hearing on the proposed 2020 millage rates for the county operations, emergency 911, parks, community mental health, and the road commission.
Support.
And moved and supported. Comments or questions?
Mr. Chair, I just want to say thank you to Karen again from Budget, just trying to, help me wrap my head around this and, point out that, we're actually milling less than we were last year. I think 5.449 was the 2020, and this year is 5.43. So, I know technically it's an increase according to state rules, but, we are milling less than last year. So, and thanks again, Karen, for helping me understand that. So.
Thank you, Mr. Zylstra. Anyone else? If not, Justin, would you call the roll, please?
Sure. Mr. Fenske,
Yes.
Mr. Zylstra,
Yes.
Mr. Kyers,
Yes.
Mr. Garcia,
Yes.
Mr. Holtvluwer,
Yes.
Mr. Baumann,
Yes.
Mr. DeYoung,
Yes.
Mr. Meppelink,
Yes.
Mr. Dannenberg, Mr. Terpstra,
Yes.
and Mr. Bergman.
Yes.
The motion passes.
The next item on the agenda is approval of agenda. Can I get a motion, please?
So moved.
And a second. Moved and seconded. Comments or questions? Was there something that was added to the agenda? Under action items?
Well, yes, the action item was added more than 24 hours in advance to approve the millage rates. That was left off the initial agenda, so it was added prior to it was added yesterday morning.
Okay, all
That
right.
would be number 1 under B, and that's the resolution to approve the 2020 millage rates, but it does come after the consent resolution, yeah.
Okay, all right. Okay, Justin, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Zylstra,
Yes.
Mr. Fenske,
Yes.
Mr. Baumann,
Yes.
Mr. Kyers,
Yes.
Mr. Garcia,
Yes.
Mr. Meppelink. Mr.
Yes.
Meppelink.
Yes,
Mr.
sorry.
Mr. Dannenberg, Mr. DeYoung,
Yes.
Mr. Holtvluwer,
Yes.
Mr. Terpstra,
Yes.
and Mr. Bergman.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Next thing, action and reports is consent resolutions 1 through 4. Mr. Fenske, would you read those or make that motion, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to move to approve consent resolutions 1 through 4.
Support.
Moved and seconded. Comments or questions? Justin, would you call the roll, please?
Yes, sir. Mr. Baumann,
Yes.
Mr. Garcia,
Yes.
Mr. Meppelink,
Yes.
Mr. Holtvluwer,
Yes.
Mr. DeYoung,
Yes.
Mr. Zylstra,
Yes.
Mr. Terpstra,
Yes.
Mr. Kyers,
Yes.
Mr. Dannenberg, Mr. Fenske,
Yes.
and Mr. Bergman.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Under action items, Mr. Baumann?
Regarding the resolution to approve the 2020 millage rates, I make a motion to approve and authorize the board chair and the clerk to sign the resolution and related documents approving the 2020 millage rates for county operations of 3.9 mils, emergency 911 of 0.4288 mils, parks of 0.3233 mils, community mental health of 0.2923 mils, and the road commission of 0.4873 mils.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Comments or questions? Justin, would you call the roll, please?
Yes, sir. Mr. Terpstra,
Yes.
Mr. Holtvluwer,
Yes.
Mr. Zylstra,
Yes.
Mr. Kyers,
Yes.
Mr. DeYoung,
Yes.
Mr. Meppelink,
Yes.
Mr. Baumann,
Yes.
Mr. Fenske,
Yes.
Mr. Dannenberg, Mr. Garcia,
Yes.
and Mr. Bergman.
Yes.
Motion passes.
All right. Next thing is appointments. There are none. As I see, there isn't any. Is that correct?
Correct.
And discussion items, under discussion items, Heath White, Ottawa County Circuit Court Probation and Parole 2019 Annual Report. You're on. You're muted.
Okay, there I am.
There you go.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. All righty. Well, thank you for having me here once again. I appreciate the county's support, and I appreciate our partnerships with the county. Definitely under some new challenges right now within our department, as with everyone else. What I'm going to first do is just go over some numbers from last year, and then I'll kind of explain how we've been adapting to this new way of doing business. Currently at this point, we're supervising 775 individuals in Ottawa County. Last year at this time, we were at 817 individuals under both probation and parole. We are currently supervising 490 in Holland, or the Holland area. We are supervising 194 people in the Grand Haven area, and there are 126 folks that are under supervision in Hudsonville. Currently in my office, we have 10 agents and 1 clerical. We also have 8 agents and 2 clerical in Grand Haven, and just 2 agents out in the Hudsonville office at this time. Last year we did approximately 775 PSI reports, which is down from the prior year of 803 in 2018. We have seen an uptick in collections from the prior year. Last year we had a 74% collection rate. This year we are up to 75%. Couple things we've seen increases in. We've seen, with regards to drug testing, we have seen an increase in methamphetamine use. 76% of our positive drug screens have been for methamphetamine. So we have seen some upticks in positive drug tests for meth. I'm trying to get my drug testing data. Last year we tested 10,000 folks with a positive test of 303. In 2018, we tested 11,000. We had 395 that are positive. One thing that we've seen the decrease in is with the department, we're trying to be a little more smart with our drug testing. We are using tests that risk evaluations that will determine whether someone is in the need of more substance abuse testing, or should we just not substance abuse test at all. If they're not at a high risk for using or abusing drugs, we're opting to not drug test them. In that effort, if they're not a risk for using, we can save money with our drug testing supplies. Currently, right now with the COVID, all our drug testing are done out in the field, and we are using saliva tests. We are not doing the normal urine analysis that we've always done. And again, we're focusing on those with a higher risk of abuse of using drugs at this time. We've seen increase in last year we completed 12,000 hours of community service. In 2019, where the year prior we completed 8,000 hours of community service. So we're seeing a lot more community service hours done for the county. This includes in working with local churches, helping out with local parks, and picking up trash and litter along the road and parks. Some changes we've had with the department is that most of us are obviously working remotely. The Department of Corrections right now has not given us approval to be in our offices at this time. So most agents are working remotely from their vehicles. I appreciate the county has been really gracious with us, helping us out with masks, gowns, hand sanitizer, gloves, in order to keep the agents safe while they're doing these drug tests and so on. One thing we've implemented this year with the county, with the Sheriff's Department, is we have an agent by the name of Jake Triplett, who the Ottawa County Sheriff's Department has him working alongside them as a liaison agent for the Sheriff's Office. The Sheriff's Department has provided him an office right there in the Sheriff's Office, in the Sheriff's Building. Jake has assisted the Sheriff's Department in a couple shootings we had back in November. One of the people involved in the case was a probation absconder from the east side of the state. Jake provided assistance at locating him along with a local parolee that was involved in the assault as well. Jake is providing the Sheriff's Office with information regarding our GPS folks under supervision. if there's a suspicion that someone may be involved in some activity, Jake has the knowledge and can share that information with the sheriff's office to show where their current location is and where they've been. Maybe if a crime occurred, Jake is able to tell the sheriff's office where a suspected individual was at the time. Right now, I don't really have anything else. I'm sorry, it's kind of brief, but is there questions I can answer for anyone?
Commissioners, any questions?
Mr. Chairman. Heath, Joe
Yes.
Bauman.
Hey.
Quick question for you on marijuana use. What is the court's stance on that for parolees?
Parolees, unless we know it's causing a significant problem in their life, they're not going to work, they're missing work. It's increasing their causing problems in their daily life. Then we'll test for it. If not, if we don't see an issue with it, we're not testing for it all that much. We're going to be focusing on some more of the harder drugs, such as like the methamphetamines. We've seen an increase in. Opioids are still out there. So unless we know that the marijuana use is interfering with their daily routine, we haven't been testing for it as much.
Thank you.
All right, Doug, go ahead.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hey, just on the cases supervised, is that mostly COVID related as far as our court system? Is there other drivers behind that?
Yeah, we've seen, because the COVID since March, we haven't seen a lot of cases have been adjourned for a later date. We've definitely seen a downward trend with our pre-sentence investigation reports due to the COVID, because a lot of these cases that were set for trial or sentencings have been adjourned for a later date. I know the courts are trying to open up. Some courts already have.
And what does a post-COVID world look like, or at least like as we kind of slowly come out? What do you suspect is going to happen to your department? You're going to see those numbers?
Well, I think right now we are seeing a trend, an uptick in parole. I think that's the case. In the cases of trying to get people out of the prisons that are maybe able to parole a little earlier and avoid, because as seen on the news, the prisons have been a breeding ground for the COVID, and there has been an increase inside the institutions with people testing positive. So we're definitely seeing an uptick in parole, but one of the things I think we're seeing as a department is agents are able to do a lot more stuff remotely. They're doing interviews where a lot of times with a face-to-face in-person contact. Most of them, if available, they're doing it through video like we are right now through Zoom. They're meeting with their clients through a FaceTime or whatever they use. In a lot of cases, that's a good thing, especially those guys who have jobs. This is a lot easier to do for them just to go on their phone during break, FaceTime their agent and say, hey, everything's going well. I'm not doing anything wrong. And the only thing they'll still have to do is drug tests if that's required. I think once things get back to normal, we're going to see an increase in, obviously, with sentencing and pre-sentence reports, because they're going to be backlogged. So we are going to see an increase once things get somewhat back to normal.
Sure. I mean, this may be a question for John in Circuit Court, but do you foresee Zoom being a part of normal proceedings going forward? I mean, has it been a tool that you can use for folks who are working, et cetera, or how do you?
Yeah, I like the Zooms are good. I know a lot of what we're doing a lot now with our substance abuse treatment programs are doing a lot of the telehealth, Zoom type meetings for treatment. That's okay, but I think it's more beneficial for those programs is the face-to-face contact within their groups.
Frank, did I see your hand up also? Okay, all right.
So, but it is good. I think the probationers, parolees who are doing well within the community can really benefit from just the FaceTime type meetings with their agent. And that gives us more time to focus more energy on those that are higher risk, maybe are not complying as well. where we can have those face-to-face interventions in our offices and so on. So yeah, I think some of the stuff we're learning, adapting to through this COVID process has been very beneficial. Time saving for those all involved. So yeah, there has been some positives we're learning about our department and the way we do business that is beneficial.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that, Heath.
Yep.
Anyone else? Doesn't sound like it, Heath. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Have a great day.
Yep, thanks. The next thing is West Michigan Enforcement Team 2019 Annual Report. Andy?
He's on his way.
Okay.
Hello.
Hi there.
My name's Andy Foster. Oh. Closer.
Yep.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. My name is Andy Foster. Thanks for having me. I'm a lieutenant with the state police assigned to the We Met Ottawa team. My boss, Andy Fias, who I believe some of you know rather well, is here downstairs, but he's actually transferring to the Lakeview Post as the post commander. So I know some of you already know that, and he has about 5 days to teach me everything he knows. So I'm here to present for you or answer any questions. I know I did pass out a packet, email packet out last week, just summarizing our 2019 activity. You know, we have a great relationship, working relationship with the detectives and deputies on our team. There's some cases I'll highlight at the end that were pretty significant, I think, for 2019. But other than that, if there was any questions or you'd like to hear anything in particular about 19 more. Yes. Sure. Sorry about that. I know 2019 though was one of our first year where Allegan was no longer a part of WeMet. They are down part of Sweat, working in kind of the Southwest Michigan. So it was just essentially WeMet Muskegon and WeMet Ottawa for the first time in 2019. Our investigations were pretty consistent, actually a little higher. There were a couple bigger cases that took up a lot of our time in 2019. But from there, we were pretty active and pretty busy for the year. A couple of the significant cases I just wanted to point out for you back in the, I guess, page, I believe it is 14. It was back in March of 19. It's a small paragraph describing the incident, but it was kind of a culmination of a lot of undercover operations from detectives from both Ottawa County and Holland City, where we did identify a major methamphetamine dealer in the Holland area, Holland Township area. And on this particular night, he was stopped with 2.5 ounces of methamphetamine on his person that he retrieved from the Kalamazoo area. Again, this was a larger conspiracy case, which we were able to take to the federal level and charge this case federally. And because of all of his, I guess, dealings in and around Ottawa County, he was charged federally and just recently was sentenced to 19 years in prison for this activity. So it was pretty significant, pretty substantial. This did lead to other search warrants for detectives down in Kalamazoo, where several firearms were seized, as well as additional narcotics down there. So it was a rather big case for us here in Ottawa County. The one just below it, back in April of 19, the homicide that occurred in Holland City, we met detectives again, assisted with that in locating and apprehending the suspect in that case that same day, almost just 8 hours later from the date of the incident. We located the suspect in that case, trying to actually leave the area to get on a bus out of state. So just another good cooperative effort we had in kind of bringing a quick resolution to a pretty horrible crime that occurred back then in April of 19. And then the last one I just want to point out too, WeMet was contacted by detectives from the east side of the state, reference a homicide that occurred over there. And suspects were allegedly living in the Ottawa County area. They were not living in the Ottawa County area, but we did locate a mom, and we set up surveillance between ourselves and the team over in Grand Rapids. Through some search warrants of cell phones, we did kind of locate a ping, if you will, or a cell phone signal near the Ottawa County and Kent County line. So again, detectives from our team set up surveillance. And just after a short time, both suspects were seen leaving the residence, and a traffic stop was made. And they were in the process of cleaning the suspect vehicle from that incident. And we were able to help take them into custody, get them back over to the Monroe County area, and help with the search warrant of that residence to uncover more evidence of the crime. So just a couple, I guess, highlighted ones, if you will. It's hard to put them all into a few pages, but I tried to put several in there for you to look over at your leisure. So.
Any comments or questions?
Hey, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Yeah, hey, Andy, just a quick question. In 2018, we had 344 arrests. In 2019, 418. And that's in spite of legalization of marijuana, or that really doesn't come into play much for you guys to begin with?
Right, that really doesn't come into play for us. We've focused our efforts mainly on, unfortunately, methamphetamine and heroin, I guess heroin / fentanyl even. I know there are teams in the state that kind of already are dedicated to tobacco tax regulation and marijuana regulation. So we don't necessarily deal with that, no.
Great, thank you, appreciate that.
Anyone else comment?
Yeah, I'd like to say something. I enjoyed, on a lighter note, I enjoyed the story of the person who stole the HVAC system.
Yes.
I mean, who thinks of that?
Right. Yeah, we've got some clever detectives that can find ways to locate those things, and that's happened more than a few times. Not just with the HVAC system, but also we've recovered Xboxes and PlayStations and other stolen items that have appeared on the Facebook Marketplace. So we don't want to give away all of our tricks, but we have.
So Mr. Dannenberg sits on this board. Do you have anything you want to add, Al? Make sure you speak into your microphone because we can't hear you real well.
I enjoy being on this board. Probably one of the more favorable boards to be on. It is very interesting. Can you hear me now? Okay.
Okay.
I enjoy being on this board, Chairman. It's a very enjoyable board. You learn a lot about your community in Ottawa County. I'm going to miss Lieutenant Feisel on this board because he's getting promoted. I thought he was very professional on everything he did with this. So I do enjoy this board immensely.
Good. Thank you. Thank you. Anyone else? Questions or comments? If not, we'll move on to a legislative update by Bob DeVries.
Good afternoon. Everybody hear me?
Push muted.
There you go. Is that better? All right. Good afternoon. Thanks for having me here. As the chairman said, my name is Bob DeVries. I work at Governmental Consultant Services Incorporated. I'm the lobbyist for Ottawa County. I was just looking back on my calendar at when the last time I gave a quarterly update, and I laughed a little bit because I was here on March 10, which is the day that we first became aware that there were 2 positive COVID cases in Michigan. And so that Tuesday, it kind of all started, and by Friday, everything was shut down nearly everywhere, at least in Lansing. Like another week before schools were canceled and things like that. But it's interesting because the landscape of everything in Lansing has changed so drastically that I can't hardly remember the things that we were working on back in February because they're so far off the radar now. Since they shut things down in Lansing, they've started to slowly open them back up over the last month or so. The legislature's meeting weekly again. Often not every single day like normal, but at least once or twice a week. They've really limited their focus still to everything related to COVID and everything related to the budget. And those have kind of become one and the same. I'll start with the budget because that's something that certainly affects the county pretty significantly. Back in May, we had a revenue estimating conference that showed that the revenues for the current fiscal year, which started on October 1 of last year and will end on September 30 of this year, are down nearly $3 billion is the estimate. Thankfully, that's offset a little bit because of all the vetoes the governor made to the last budget. She also vetoed a fairly significant budget supplemental bill that was passing in early March, right about the time I was talking to you guys last time. There's almost $1 billion of money just sitting on the balance sheet right now. If it would have ended the year on the balance sheet, we'd call it a surplus. But that money can be used to defray some of this revenue losses. So you'll hear the $3 billion number for this year, and you'll hear the $2 billion number. It's kind of the same thing. It's just we're $3 billion down in revenue, but we're actually $2 billion in projected deficit because of the money that had been left over. And that's honestly, that's the biggest mid-year deficit I've ever seen in my time working in Lansing. We went from having extremely positive economic forecasts in the beginning of this year, talking about how there'd be a lot of money to spend, that people like Ottawa County that had budget priorities would have a pretty high likelihood of being able to go and get some money for things. We'd been advocating for $1 million of funding to support a groundwater testing system for the county, to now figuring out how are they going to cut $2 billion between now and September 30. Just for perspective, there's about $26 billion that the state controls. 16 of that is in the school aid fund, funds our public school systems. Some of it goes towards universities and community colleges as well. There's about $10 billion in the general fund that funds everything else. You'll hear the $60 billion budget number, which is also true, but all the rest of that money is federal money that gets passed through for things like Medicaid and Medicare, and some for the schools, and for many other programs that are funded out of Washington that pass through Lansing. But the legislature has pretty significant control over that $26 billion. And so this budget problem popped up halfway through the budget year. And so if about half of that money has been spent already, they're trying to figure out how to take $2 billion for the rest of this year out of what may be more like a $13 billion pot. So the best advice is, if you're expecting money from the state for the rest of this year, I wouldn't count on it. I mean, they don't exactly know where they're coming from yet. You'll still get something for sure. But right now, the governor and the legislature are kind of fighting over who's going to take the first step. And so the longer they wait, the more drastic the cuts are going to have to be. There are two different ways that mid-year budget cuts can happen. The first, and the more common one in the past when this type of thing has happened at a smaller scale, is that the governor issues an executive order cutting spending. So when the legislature creates a budget, it's not a mandate to spend money, it's an allowance to spend money, and then the governor is allowed to spend up to that amount of money for the purposes explained in the budget. So under that idea, the governor issues an executive order saying, well, you gave me $200 million for this thing, I'm changing it now to $150 million or whatever it is. And then the legislature has to approve that executive order, and then the budget numbers are officially changed. The other way to go is that the legislature could take the lead and pass what's called a negative supplemental, where they pass a budget bill that instead of adding money to be spent, takes away money. And it's a little bit tougher because the legislature doesn't have the same level of information as the governor does about where the money is. They know that $100 million was appropriated to this department for this purpose for an example, but they don't exactly have the information about how much money has been spent, how much money is left. Of the money that's left, what are allocated to things that can't be cut, like utilities or something like that. And so the legislature is really pushing on the governor to kind of take that first step, and it hasn't happened yet. The governor has responded by saying that she's confident that the state will receive more COVID bailout money from the federal government. So far, we haven't seen much evidence of that. A bill passed the House of Representatives in Washington, but it's been stalled in the Senate. That would have allocated a couple of $1 million to the state just for budget relief. And so right now, it's a little bit of a game of chicken in Lansing to see who's going to take that next step. But we do expect there to be some significant spending cuts between now and the end of the year, end of the fiscal year, which is September 30. Moving on to next year, the deficit is currently projected at about $3 billion. And once again, the deficit is maybe not the best word. The revenue estimates from January when they had a conference to May are down about $3 billion for the next fiscal year, which would put us, $3 billion in the hole compared to the budget that the governor proposed in February. The numbers are changing so rapidly, though, that the legislature has asked to have another revenue estimating conference in either late August or early September. That's going to be necessary because one of the executive orders the governor issued was to delay the tax deadlines. And so often we have a revenue estimating conference in May because everybody's filed their taxes for the most part by then, and we know we have the information you need to know how much money is in the revenue column and how much money you have to pay out in tax refunds, et cetera. We're not going to have that yet because it's not until July that those taxes are now due. So there will be another revenue estimating conference in late August or early September, which has never really happened before. There's typically 2 every year. This will be the 3rd one. But that timeline is bumping up against a new statutory timeline that was passed that says the legislature must have their budget completed by July 1. And so it's still not clear what they're going to do. The legislature has kind of maintained that they plan on having their budget done by July 1. But with that only being 3 weeks from now, they haven't really done anything publicly yet. They've had some small hearings on, the state of the economy, but they have not traded budget bills back and forth. We're really at the budget stage right now where we were in March when things shut down, where you would typically expect 3 more months of budget work before a budget gets passed. So there's a lot of speculation, and I think some of it's because the governor and the legislature just aren't on the same page yet. The governor made some comments yesterday about how that July 1 deadline is not going to be met. The speaker has made some comments about potentially passing some sort of continuing resolution that might fund 3 months of government, from October 1 to the end of the year, with the ability then to come back this fall after those new numbers come in and make a full budget. I don't think they quite know yet, but they're doing their work. They're just quite a bit behind. I'd be shocked if they have a fully formed, fully complete budget on July 1. So with that being said, it's going to be tough no matter what. I guess unless we get millions or billions of dollars from the federal government unexpectedly, it's going to be tough. Everything that's discretionary, I would imagine, will take some sort of hit, and that includes things like revenue sharing payments. And so we will do our best to advocate to keep those cuts small or to push those cuts other places. But I think the prudent thing is to prepare for some sort of negative revenue adjustment. The other thing the legislature has been working on significantly is making a lot of changes to the law in response to COVID-related things. First, after the legislature sued the governor over her emergency powers, they started codifying a number of her executive orders, partially because they wanted to make sure that some of the orders that they agreed with, things like not making you get your license renewed when all the Secretary of State's offices are closed, for example. They wanted to make sure that those things were in statute so that if all of these orders went away based on a court decision, that citizens were still protected by some of those things. So they've been working hard on codifying a lot of those kinds of things, but they're also going a little further in many areas, and some of them we're starting to realize are having some unintended consequences. And so county staff has been great about working with me on trying to figure some of these things out. Like the one that Al and I have been working on just this week, along with Amanda, was about delaying tax payments and late fees and things like that. And it's going to, as we look at it and we realize this is going to cost the state some money or the county some money, and it's probably, a headly issue. And so that gives me some ammunition to go work with and try to either fix the bill or get it to stop. So we've had to be really vigilant because everybody's trying to do things in the name of helping citizens because of COVID, but the unintended consequences can be significant too. And that's really going to everywhere. There's been talk about a lot of talk about how the elections are going to work this year. I'm sure that Clerk Roebuck has been involved in a lot of those things, and some of them haven't been fully straightened out yet. There's federal money coming for all sorts of specifically COVID-related things. We're working on trying to figure out how we can direct that to the county as much as possible. There seems to be some momentum towards putting some more money towards community mental health, understanding that what's happened the last several months is having a negative effect on our community's mental health. And so I think that we'll see some of that happening in the forthcoming supplementals. We've also been working on making sure in the supplemental that's being worked on right now and will likely pass the House next week, the Senate version was unclear on some of the first responder bonus pay that's in there, on whether corrections officers would be qualified or not. We were able to get that clarified to make sure that they would be at the request of the county. And so that's good. I should also say that the letter that the commission wrote to the governor got a lot of attention in Lansing in a very positive way. And so good work on that. I think that the timing was nice in that it was right about the time when things were opening up. And I think it helped push things in a positive direction. But Ottawa County got a lot of positive attention, to the point where some of the other counties that we work with asked for copies of it. They wanted to do something similar. And so I thought that was really good. I think that's it as far as what's happening now. The timeline for what happens next in Lansing is still up in the air once again. It's all going to depend on when the budget gets done or what their budget plan is. I think everybody's still thinking that the legislature will take their traditional summer recess, at least for July and August. But if there's not a budget done, that may be a challenge. Don't forget, though, the House of Representatives is up for election, and a lot of those guys have to go back and worry about a primary challenge and start to get their ducks in a row for November. So they will certainly take some time off this summer, but we don't know quite when. Under a normal year, they're off for July and August. They come back for a week or two or three in September after Labor Day, and then they take October off again to kind of finish up the campaigns. I do think there's probably going to be a pretty significant lame duck this year, which provides some challenges and some opportunities. So we'll work with you guys to identify some areas where we can advocate then. Happy to answer any questions.
Yeah.
Any questions for Bob?
Yes. Mr. Chairman, I got one, Al Dannenberg. I've heard in the news a little bit that the schools are looking at a 25% cut, or is that just stuff that was thrown out there?
Yeah, I don't know where that number came from. I heard that a little bit too. I think some of it is people are probably just doing the simple math of how much money is left to be paid to the schools and how much money we might need to cut, and somebody came up with that number. I don't think it'll be that significant. The other interesting thing is that the Senate Majority Leader made a proclamation right after these budget numbers kind of came out, said that he was going to find a way to do it without the schools having to take a cut, which is admirable, but also it makes the cuts everywhere else deeper. So that was just one guy. He doesn't have the ability to do that unilaterally, but there is, one of the kind of the three important leaders in Lansing has made that public statement. So it won't be 25%. Even if you had to take $1 billion out of the schools, which is what the school aid fund part is short, it won out of $26 billion. And so I don't know where 25% would have come from.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Kuyers, on some administrative departments like the DNR and EGLE and stuff like that, financially, what's that going to do to them, you think?
I think it's going to be significant. Now, I think probably the first place you'll see it is in labor. I mean, I wouldn't anticipate long-term layoffs, but everybody, all the state employees have started to take furlough days. I think that will continue. There's certainly been hiring freezes and pay freezes. So, the 2 or 3% raise that they were all expecting under their union contracts have been frozen for now. And so those savings start to add up a little bit, especially when you carry over for a full year. I think that you'll see an effort probably to increase permit fees and find ways to drive some revenue to make up for some of these things, especially if there are areas where permit fees don't cover the entirety of whatever program they're supposed to be working with. But also at the same time, people understand, I think legislators especially understand that people don't have as much money today as they used to. And so increasing fees, increasing taxes, things like that is a tough sell as well. But it'd be unclear, other than to say that I think every department is going to feel it in one way or another.
Anyone else? Thank you, Mr. DeVries.
Thank you.
Comments? Next up is Jen from the Harbor Humane Society with an update. Hi, Jen, you got to unmute yourself. There you go.
So I'm Jen Self-Auger. I'm the executive director of Harbor Humane Society. And with me, I have Allison Dieters, who's our operations director. And we just kind of put together a little PowerPoint just to kind of go over what Harbor's been up to, what we're going to be up to, and just inform all you fine people of what we're doing. So give me just a minute to get that set up.
Okay.
Are you guys able to see that?
Yes.
Perfect. So Harbor Humane Society, our mission is to provide a safe harbor for animals entrusted to our care as we strive to secure their future through our adoption, outreach, and educational programs. We really believe in socially conscious animal sheltering, which is kind of a new concept. And I just want to quickly go over the 8 points of it and why we believe that this is a model that is great for Harbor to have. So the first thing is that we want to ensure every unwanted or homeless pet has a safe place to go for shelter and care. We believe in placing every healthy and safe animal. And I think that's a really important distinction between us and potentially other shelters or rescues that may be out there. We do go through health and behavior assessments with all of our animals. And we do work really hard to put back safe animals into our community. Of course, working with the Ottawa County Sheriff's Department and the other city police departments, we do sometimes see animals that probably, we don't want on our streets. And so Harbor is very committed to making sure that the animals we adopt out are safe and healthy. We make sure and we want to align our policy with the needs of the community. We consider the health and wellness of each animal in every community when transferring them between communities. So we take in animals from other shelters. We also sometimes send out animals to other shelters if it's in the best interest of that animal. We believe in fostering a culture of transparency, ethical decision-making, mutual respect, continual learning, and collaboration. We have nothing to hide, and so we're basically an open book. We believe in assessing the medical and behavioral needs of homeless animals and ensuring that these needs are thoughtfully addressed. We believe in alleviating suffering and making appropriate euthanasia decisions. And then, of course, enhancing the human-animal bond through thoughtful placements and post-adoption support. So just a little background, as most of you probably know, Harbor was founded in 1956 as Ottawa Shores Humane Society. We take in all strays in Ottawa County. In addition, we also take in owner-surrendered animals and transfers from other shelters. We also take in all bite holds, cruelty and neglect cases, abandonment cases, and law holds. Some of those law holds, which can go up for, we've had some dogs in our custody for 4 months while things are being figured out on the law side. We feed, house, vaccinate, microchip, spay, neuter, and provide medical care to the more than 3,700 animals that enter our shelter each year. Services that we offer. So obviously shelter for all the unwanted, abused, lost, or stray animals in Ottawa County and beyond. Placement of animals into humane environments. Lost and found services to reunite pets with their owners. We run Ottawa County Lost and Found Facebook page. Social media is really probably the #1 way that people find out, if their pets are lost and they find out that they're at the shelter. We provide help for low-income pet owners. So this is part of our intake diversion program. We really believe pets are best kept in their homes and not having to be turned into a shelter. And so through our intake diversion, we offer pet food assistance, vaccine clinics, and spay and neuter services. We do humane education programming. You'll notice in one of the pictures, we have several children reading to dogs. That's part of our Reading with Fido program, where members of the community, when we're not under quarantine, come in and pick a book and pick a dog, and both the child and the dog has an amazing time. We offer behavior and training classes. And then we also have our resale shop, which used to be known as Shelby's Place, but it's just another way of revenue for us and to get kind of our mission and message out there. In 2019 statistics, we took in a total of 3,721 animals. 56% of those were strays, 24% were relinquished by owners, and 20% were transferred in from other shelters. Those are both shelters in Michigan and shelters that are out of state. We have some partners that we work really closely with. And then we also, basically when we're transferring animals, it's because those animals are facing euthanasia at the shelter that they're at. Last year, we took in a total of 1,370 dogs and just over 2,300 cats. So cats definitely come at a faster rate than dogs. We also took in 61 other animals. So we had some farm animals, small animals, birds, and we even had a snake that was found abandoned on the side of 31. So that was an interesting day. Our outcomes, we had 2,881 adoptions. 298 animals were returned to their owners, 159 were transferred to another agency, 102 were returned to field, so that for some of you that came in toward our facility, I think it was a few months ago now, you saw our feral colony. So we sit on quite a bit of acreage, and so we have a feral colony for cats that aren't able to be placed up for adoption. And then we also have a very robust barn cat or working cat program where we try to find alternative placements, once again, for cats that aren't good candidates to be indoor pets. And then we do have a 91% live release rate, which is really impressive. And it's something, if you look at different animal welfare organizations around the United States, this is kind of the benchmark that they want communities to be at, is at least a 90%. And I will say that I absolutely believe 100% of all adoptable animals are placed for adoption. So the cost to run the shelter, I'm going to let Allison, our operations and finance person, talk about this.
Hi everyone, I'm Allison Dieters. I'm the operations director, and like Jen said, I do all of the finances. So animals are typically housed at Harbor for an average of 10 days, and that 10-day stay costs about $202 per animal that comes to us, and that's assuming that the animal is completely healthy and only needs like their vaccines and preventative and no like extra special treatment. And then after that, each day it costs anywhere from $20 to $35 per day, depending on what that particular animal needs. Again, if there's like additional medical care, that's not included. So I could spend hours talking about our finances, but I'm going to try to sum it up in this graph with our 2019 income and expenses. And then if you guys have any questions for us and want to delve into anything more specific, I'm happy to answer it. I also have similar graphs like this for 2018 and 2017 that I'd be happy to provide via email if you are interested. But you'll see our main source of income is individual donors and our events. And then next are our shelter services. So shelter services are things like our adoption fees, and then like our low income spay neuter services, things like that, where we're not really making a lot of profit on those things. Next is our county contract, which we hold with you guys. So that makes up about 18% of our income. And looking at 2019, 2018, and 2017, it's been pretty steady at 17 to 18% of our income. And then our resale store, as Jen mentioned, we get 15% of our income from there. It is in Holland, off of Felt Street in the shops at West Shore, and they do a really awesome job there. They actually just reopened, so that's really exciting. And then 7% of our funding comes from various grants, and then 3% comes from the programming that Jen talked about, the behavior classes, kids camps, things like that. As far as our expenses, as you can see, most of our expenses go towards animal and veterinary care, rightfully so. It takes a lot of supplies, a lot of staff, and things like that to take care of all of our animals. About 10% goes into our fundraising efforts, about 8% to our resale store, about 6% to programming. So you can see that it's more of a chunk of our expenses than our profits. However, those programs are for the community's benefit. We're not really looking to make money on those things. And then we have admin costs that hover right around 6% to keep the lights on.
So 2020 and beyond, what we're looking at, what we're hoping for, we're going to continue doing our community outreach, creating initiatives to combat overpopulation of animals, intake diversion, and teaching humane treatment and care of animals. We were beginning, before coronavirus hit, we were starting phase 1 of our pet care assistance program, which is a mobile vaccine program that meets low-income pet owners in their community to provide services. We were lucky enough to receive a grant through the Grand Haven Community Foundation. And so we will be offering these services in the Tri-Counties area, focusing on kind of mobile home parks, trailer home parks, areas that we see a large amount of strays coming from, or areas that officers or other members of the community have indicated that there may be some help needed with those animals in that area. And that basically is providing those animals for $5. They get a rabies vaccine, microchip, distemper vaccine, and then can access spay and neuter services. So our hope is to really, especially in this time when people potentially are facing economic difficulty, to be able to provide those services to people and help them keep their animals in their houses and part of their families. We continue to do youth, animal, and adult programming year-round. We do a number of events at the shelter, to on-site classroom visits, to summer camps, and we look forward to the continued education efforts in our community. We look at continuing 100% placement of adoptable animals, and continuing to find new and innovative ways to be a socially conscious animal shelter. And we're going to continue to tell their stories. So in closing, I just want to highlight 3 quick stories of strays that ended up with us. This is Hudson. And so Hudson was found by an Ottawa County Sheriff's deputy. He had been hit by a car. It was like midnight on a weekend. He was able to get the dog to our facility. We were able to have staff and actually one of our vets meet them there. I'm happy to say Hudson had a number of things going on. It was a little touch and go for a while, but basically he had a whole fractured leg. We were able to save the leg. There was luckily no internal damage, and Hudson is now happily living in a home, and he's an awesome dog. So we are really happy for him. Karen is a 13-year-old dog that was picked up off the streets of Holland, and Karen had, I won't show you pictures because it'll not be happy for you, but she had a very, very bad mouth. Just her teeth were basically falling out. And so we were able to invest in Karen and take basically all her teeth out. I would say she would try to bite a lot before she had her teeth taken out because she was in such a considerable amount of pain. But now Karen's pain-free and super happy and living in a house and eating lots of wet food. And then we have John. You might have heard John's story. So John was found in a porta potty in a park in Coopersville. He was left in a crate, determined to be abandoned there. And John was able to come to our shelter. And he is currently he's been adopted. He's in a foster home right now. But so these are the animals, and there's a ton of cats too, but dogs were just kind of what I had the most stories about. But a lot of animals that, we continue to fight for on a daily basis. And then that's our contact information. If you haven't been for a tour and would like to arrange one, we are definitely happy to do that. And does anyone have any questions?
Anybody have questions for either Jenna or Allison? If not, thank you, ladies.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next thing on our agenda is report by county administrator.
Yes, just a few items for you today. We are opening county facilities again on Monday, June 15. However, that doesn't mean that everything's going to be open for all services. Some offices are phasing back into operations by still doing a number of services by appointment, such as the clerk register in the treasurer's office. We also have the courts are under a different schedule mandated by the state court administrator or Supreme Court administrator's office. And so we're not expecting the trials with juries will resume until mid-July. And so they're phasing in a little differently. But we will, Shannon Felgner will be putting information out over the net that contains all these nuances so that we do our best to inform the public on what will be open when. We are planning, we're researching, John and facilities and IT are working on a plan to hopefully hold the next board meeting in the commission chambers. We do want to continue to observe good social distancing and guidelines, although we'd love to be able to do it by not having people 6 feet apart and wearing masks. So it might be that we use plexiglass or something just to get through, you know, the rest of the social distancing time. And then that room's better for us to stream meetings as well. So I think we do a little bit better product if we stream from that room. We did start streaming during COVID. The plan is to continue with that. And I think it's been working well. I think, but certainly let me know if you have any questions or comments regarding that. We did have a strategic planning session, our annual session on the schedule for Friday. Chair Bergman and I talked about that earlier today, and he would like to move that for at least a month. And I think Roger, who can speak for himself, obviously, but the spirit is that's a time not only where we do planning, and it's kind of our annual update, where are we at, and then you add some things as far as where you'd like us to go. But it's also a time of good fellowship and a time to talk and relate, and that's harder to do from 6 feet away and all that. So I think that Regina will work to find a date, and we'll work towards that, and we're just kind of living a day at a time, right, as far as what's going to happen in the world. And so plan on strategic planning like that. I did decide to extend basically the convenience fee. We basically lifted the requirement for people to pay internet convenience fees during COVID so that there wouldn't be a penalty to pay on the net. And we have had a number of people take advantage of that. We did decide to extend that to July 28th, which is the end of our county declaration, and we'll assess during that time to basically see what we do after that time. As Bob mentioned, we are working on a number of pieces of legislation. Probably one of my own greater frustrations with term limits is that when people don't have the experience, they tend to make decisions without understanding that government is a system. So they flock to a decision thinking they're solving something. So you push down here and it pops up in 5 other places. And that's what happens when you mess with the tax system. And you decide to delay some things. There's actually ramifications of that people don't think about, you know, when they make those decisions. And so I think, you know, that creates a lot more work for our lobbyists and the Michigan Association of Counties and John and the rest of our staff, just to try to keep up not only with the change, but with the 5 other things you have to try to fix when these things happen. The other thing I would say is we are watching the budget very closely. We don't know yet what exactly the state is going to do. I think at last count, we were down about $800,000 in revenue. Now I should say it's really about 8 to 9 million, but the rest of that is in delinquent tax fees, which we will collect eventually. And the 800,000 is more of a general fund number. The thing that we're looking at, and I did ask staff to take, you know, to contact the House and Senate Fiscal Agency and to dig into some of the numbers, because, you know, it's like my son bought a truck 3 weeks ago and he's still driving it without having registered it under his name. And so you can't, all those fees remain to be collected, and they must be collected. And so as far as the state is down, we know there will be a recovery of some of that, That's a little bit different take than what the Great Recession was. And so I'm really glad, in fact, I was going to suggest that I'm really glad to hear there's going to be a fall revenue estimating conference, because I think it could be a different picture. And I hate to see decisions made at the very worst of a crisis when things recover to some extent at least, and end up having, something that's really out of whack by the time we get to the next start of the next fiscal year. Also wanted to congratulate Lieutenant Fias. I do chair the WEMET board, and but we just sure hate to see him go. He's just been a fantastic director, but it's also good to see him elevate his career in the way that he's wanted to, and I think we will end up with a very quality replacement. So that's all for today.
Thank you, Al. Any questions for Al? If not,
Al, is there a possibility that with the revenue that, and then also with the discussion that there could be a second wave, that we actually might be looking at more of a deficit than we currently have?
I think so, Frank. And we've been cautious about, if you'll remember during the Great Recession, we did cut $14 million from the general fund to make sure the budget stayed balanced all the way through. And we did actually a couple of times budget from the stabilization fund, which is another fund we have as a firewall beyond general fund balance. And, we didn't have to use it. We ended the year good. We put the money right back in. So our thinking has been that if it's a reasonable or small amount of money we need to make up, that we'll recommend tapping that fund. If round 2 hits, and if it's worse in the way that the 1918 pandemic was worse, then I think that it could be a totally different story. Then I think you would hear us talking about some of the measures that other places have taken. But I think we just need to see if and when and what happens at that time. But yes, it is on our minds, and I think we could see a different reaction from us and a greater impact on some of our funding sources as well.
Okay, thank you.
any other comments for Al? If not, the next thing is general information, comments, and meetings attended.
Yeah, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Yeah, I just want to highlight the George Floyd Unity March that happened this past Sunday in Holland, and to thank the thousands who came to show solidarity against injustice and to affirm that Black lives really do matter here in Ottawa County. I do believe that, as we go forward as a board, we need to listen to these voices and keep their concerns and demands in mind so that we can make sure our decisions, practices, and policies work for all 280,000 Ottawa County residents. I also believe that we need, as so many public commenters today have urged us to, declarative affirm that Black Lives Matter here in Ottawa County.
Anyone else? If not, I'd like to make a comment also based on what is happening in our country, and based on some of the comments that we've had today, I've decided that I need to say something. We are living in a time of profound hurt, frustration, and for many deep disappointment and despair regarding high-profile violent events against Black Americans. The most recent being the heartbreaking images and death of George Floyd. This event, as well as too many others, brings much pain and trauma to our community. We simply cannot let them go unnoticed or fail to acknowledge the fundamental injustice they represent. Ottawa County values Black lives, and we deeply grieve with the family of Mr. George Floyd. We support the right of citizens to voice their concerns as a result of his death. We recognize during this time the importance of continuing to build trust in the community. We will always support our local law enforcement, and we demand justice for actions that are found to be against the sheriff's office policy and/or the law. We must, as individuals, leaders, and organizations, continue to strive to do better. In order for our region to be safe and welcoming, it must be a place where everyone, regardless of our innate human difference, can experience this personally. Ottawa County commits to making positive progress on the issues related to racial and cultural divisions. Our safety, prosperity, and desire to see a quality of life maximized for all future generations of residents depends on it. Ottawa County's vision is a place where you belong. As leaders, we stand for diversity, equity, and inclusion, as well as respect and justice for all. The county understands this work is intentional, has been proactively making it a priority. In 2019, Ottawa County created the first ever Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Department to serve Ottawa County. The office will lead in a proactive manner, building capacity and strategies in our systems and leadership to identify and dismantle systemic human barriers, such as, but not limited to, racial division and implicit bias, while ensuring equity for all. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to thank you for your words and your courage. And also, we had the folks who spoke in through Zoom and through chat. You know, it would have been so much easier if we just remained silent. But as leaders, I don't think that we're able to do that. You know, in the words of Martin Luther King, he said that there comes a time when one must take a position that is neither safe nor popular, but he must take it because his conscience tells him it is right. And so I thank you for that. At 8 o'clock every morning on my iWatch, I have it, so it pops up, you know, with the scripture, you know, my favorite scripture, and it's Micah 6:8, and it provides a guidance for me. And I think it might provide guidance for everyone. And it reads, "He has shown you what is good and what the Lord requires of you, to act justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God." So I thank you, Mr. Chairman, for your words.
Thank you. Next thing on the agenda is public comment.
Mr. Chair, there are no public comments. However, there are several chats, the first of which is from Barbara Lee Van Horsen at 19 Lafayette in Grand Haven. Thank you for establishing the DEI department. I join many others in asking you to make a statement in support of Black Lives Matter. I ask you to support other events and organizations addressing this issue, and I ask you to continue prioritizing racial justice after there is no longer a long line to make public comment. The next chat, good afternoon. My name is Sonia Trent Brown, 1255 Quail Creek Drive in Holland. I've lived in Holland for 15 years. I came to Holland as a professor in the Hope College Psychology Department and currently serve at Hope as Chief Officer for Culture and Inclusion. Thank you for your efforts in creating the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Office in Ottawa County. It is sorely needed, and we need continuous attention to efforts to continue to make Holland an inclusive place for all its citizens. I've been heartened by the recent show of support at peaceful protest gatherings. However, the voices of Black and Brown people have been crying out for years. I'm grateful for the additional voices. I'm grateful for the additional voices that have been crying out alongside my Black and Brown sisters and brothers. As an African American woman in our community, I am asking you to continue to listen to the voices that have been lifted and to understand that we are serving this community as well. I have served with the Holland Zeeland Community Foundation and Ready for Schools Readiness Council, and with the Outdoor Discovery Center and the No Child Left Inside Task Force. My husband has been stopped numerous times for being a Black man driving in Holland and because he, quote, fit the description, unquote. My son at age 7 had to sit in the back seat of our vehicle on one such occasion when my husband was pulled over by Zeeland police officers across the street from his school, and the police would not let my husband take our son to school. On this occasion, he was told that he was pulled over for driving with an obstructed view because of his Hope College parking hang tag. I've had my son in kindergarten come home to tell me that students at his school said that pink people are better than brown people. As much as we appreciate the beauty of downtown Holland, we stopped spending time there because of the stares we received and the experiences we've had in some downtown shops. I have watched outstanding, talented Hope College colleagues of color leave because of their experiences being a person of color in Holland. With the new Ottawa County DEI office, you have such an opportunity to make Ottawa County a leader in the state of Michigan and beyond, and how to do inclusivity well. Again, I commend you for your efforts thus far, and I eagerly anticipate seeing the action steps you will implement for the work of diversity, equity, and inclusion in our county. Thank you. And then Leslie Verdine wrote, she's from 15954 Croswell Street in West Olive. To quote Dr. Deb Holden of MSU College of Human Medicine and Michigan Coronavirus Task Force on Racial Disparities this afternoon, quote, our natural drift is towards inequity. We need to build equity into police and practice, build equity into resource allocation. I thank the Ottawa County Board of Commissioners in their part of beginning the Office of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion. Now is not the time to rest on our laurels, though. With the current state of unrest and calling for equity and to put an end to racism, now is the time to state loud and clear that Ottawa County supports Black Lives Matter. My hope is that this helps move us towards addressing the disparities our Black people have been living with for way too long. We need to take this time to address equity concerns for them and work towards a remedy for anyone not being treated as a human being who is valued, appreciated, and made to feel as a part of the Ottawa County community where all of us matter. That's the last chat.
Thank you, John. Is there anyone else from the public?
There are no other chats or public comments.
Okay, with that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Moved and supported. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. We're adjourned. Thank you, gentlemen and ladies.
Hard to disagree with.